Imagine a monarch who reigned longer than any before her, a face on teacups and banknotes, a symbol of moral certainty and domestic order. Now imagine that same figure at the center of whispers, political decisions that cost lives, and secrets that never reached the public in her lifetime. This is Queen Victoria, adored sovereign, architect of an era, and the subject of darker stories that history often sidelines. Watch until the end. The final twist will change how you remember the Victorian age. Early life and accession. Victoria was born Alexandrina Victoria on May 24, 1819. She became queen at 18 in 1837, after the death of her uncle, King William IV. She was young, charismatic, and quickly became the focal point of a modernizing nation. In 1840 she married her cousin Prince Albert. Their partnership shaped both court life and royal image. Albert's influence on policy, taste, and public duties was profound until his death in 1861, after which Victoria retreated into mourning and seclusion for years. Achievements and legacy. Her reign lasted 63 years, longer than any of her predecessors, and it gave its name to an entire epoch. Under Victoria, Britain became the preeminent industrial and imperial power. She presided over massive technological change, the expansion of railways, reform of institutions, and the consolidation of parliamentary democracy, even as the monarchy itself grew more symbolic and ceremonial. In 1876 she accepted the title Empress of India, symbolically tying the crown to the subcontinent. Dark stories and controversies. The label Victorian often evokes stiff moral codes, prudery, and domesticity. But behind the porcelain platitudes are harder, messier realities, policies, personal choices, and social structures that had violent consequences. Imperial violence and repression. The Indian Rebellion of 1857 was a watershed. British forces crushed the uprising with brutal reprisals, summary executions, collective punishments, and atrocities that shocked contemporaries. The uprising led to the end of East India Company rule and the transfer of power to the British Crown, a shift that made Victoria Empress of India and normalized direct imperial rule. Under Crown rule and later colonial administrations, policies were often punitive and extractive. Military pacification and the maintenance of imperial order were enforced with harsh measures that left long-term scars in many colonies. Famine, free markets, and human cost. Several major famines struck parts of the British-ruled world during the Victorian century. Government responses were shaped by prevailing economic ideas: minimal intervention, private charity, and continued export of food and raw materials even from regions suffering shortage. Historians argue that these policy choices, the prioritization of markets and exports, delayed relief measures, and bureaucratic indifference, worsened hunger and increased mortality. The moral dissonance is stark. A period celebrated for progress also oversaw preventable suffering on a vast scale. The politics of image and moral supremacy. Victoria's public persona, sober, devout, domestic, became a moral standard exported across the empire. That image justified, for many contemporaries, the extension of British social norms and authority into colonized societies. The same moral fervor that praised family values could be used to rationalize interventions that destroyed local institutions and livelihoods. Private scandals and courtroom gossip. ChatGPT plus Midjourney GPT-5. The Queen's private life was not free of controversy. After Albert died, she relied on a small inner circle in Balmoral and Osborne House. One of the most enduring scandals centered on John Brown, a Scottish servant and personal attendant. Rumors of an unusually close relationship between Brown and the Queen circulated in the press and among courtiers. Historians still debate how intimate that relationship was, but the gossip revealed elite anxiety about a powerful monarch's reliance on a working-class confidant. Later, Victoria's relationship with Abdul Karim, an Indian clerk who became her munshi and close companion in the 1880s and 1890s, provoked intense hostility from the royal household and government aides. The treatment of Karim, ostracized, insulted, and ultimately dismissed after Victoria's death, exposes the racism and gatekeeping inside the heart of the monarchy. The limits of constitutional power, Victoria exercised personal influence over ministers and public opinion, sometimes forcefully. Yet her withdrawal into mourning also had political consequences. At times her preferences shaped foreign policy or court appointments. At others, her absence allowed ministers to act without the moderating effect of a visible sovereign. The monarchy's subtle leverage could protect elites and obscure accountability. Family alliances and a tangled Europe, Victoria's 9 children married across the continent, earning her the nickname the Grandmother of Europe. Those dynastic ties helped spread British influence but also knitted a web of family loyalties that, decades later, complicated European politics. The personal became geopolitical in ways that historians still untangle. Why these stories matter. It's easy to treat Victoria as a benign emblem, a grandmotherly figure on postcards. But those darker pieces of the story matter because they reveal how symbols of virtue can coexist with, and even enable, harm. The moral language of the age, duty, civilization, domestic order, was sometimes the rhetoric used to justify conquest, economic extraction, and cultural domination. Final reveal here is the twist you didn't expect. The most disturbing truth about Queen Victoria is not a single cruel act or a tawdry scandal. It is this: her carefully crafted image, the stern, moral, and domestic sovereign, became a political tool that helped legitimize an empire whose operations produced vast human suffering. In other words, the myth of Victorian morality made the mechanics of imperialism feel respectable. That sanitizing narrative persists in many ways. Museums and souvenir shops sell a comforting version of Victoria, a steady hand who guided Britain through modernity. But when you follow the less flattering threads, famines, repression, racist court politics, and the economics the crown symbolized, you see a different continent of consequences. The very image that made her reassuring at home helped obscure the violence done in her name abroad. Ending thoughts, so watch for the paradox. Celebrated as the figurehead of an age of stability and virtue, Victoria's reign also normalized policies and institutions that inflicted hardship on millions. The final question to leave your viewers with is simple and uncomfortable. Do we remember monarchs for the comfort of their image, or do we reckon with the full scope of what ruling in their name actually meant? If you stayed until the end, ask yourself which Victoria you are willing to accept: the porcelain queen on a teacup, or the sovereign whose era reshaped the world, for better and for far worse. Thank you for watching. If you want more stories like this, give it a like. Good luck.